Pro wrestling is about crafting the illusion of live combat. The conflict between opponents is artificial, but this allows it to be customized to fit narrative skeletons, story structures. By doing this, we enable a type of dramatic storytelling which is far rarer in legitimate sport. But this is also one of the many things that makes pro wrestling so seductive to people of various skill sets and various mindsets. I'm Mike Quackenbush. This is Till We Make It. And if you are passionate about the craft of professional wrestling, if you're never done learning, growing, or evolving, please consider subscribing to my channel down below. That way, you never miss out on a video. There certainly are disciplines in which the conflict is no illusion. Mixed martial arts would seem to be one of these. Depending on how you feel about the legitimacy of boxing, maybe boxing goes on this list. And there are martial arts and combat sports galore. Up against professional wrestling, they are comparatively free of artifice. And despite how clear and distinct I imagine this division must be between the fictional realm of professional wrestling and legitimate competition, from time to time we do end up with someone in professional wrestling possessed of a mindset that might serve them better in a different discipline. For the purpose of making an example today, I'm going to use MMA, but I want you to know I'm just making an example of that. You could easily substitute out MMA for any other type of legitimate competition. Right off the bat, let me say this. If you have the skill and the desire to compete in legitimate combat sport, I think that's awesome. Don't get me wrong. But if you imagine this will allow you to transition readily into a career as a professional wrestler, I want you to know the crossover between these two disciplines could be minimal. In my long experience as a coach, I have found that if you train exclusively to strike, throw, or submit opponents as fast as possible, you will have to unlearn parts of that skill set so that you are able to learn the skill of being a professional wrestler. Depending on the exact discipline you've already mastered, it may prove very challenging to adapt to the world of professional wrestling. Not impossible, but very challenging. Under the umbrella of mixed martial arts, we could look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is a beautiful art form in and of itself, just like pro wrestling is. And to the untrained eye, they might appear to have a lot of commonalities. And of course, they do share some. But in the same way that an electric guitar and a harp are both musical instruments which have strings on them, being very talented at one of these may give you no more than a baseline understanding of how to play the other. Before we do a quick little inventory, I want to repeat an adage that I heard time and time again during the years I was breaking into professional wrestling. And this old adage says, any drunk idiot can get into a fight. The art form of pro wrestling is, we make it look like we get into a fight, but everyone goes home without a scratch on them. Or, to flip that pancake over, if you are possessed of a need to hit other human beings as hard as humanly possible, perhaps pro wrestling is not the right discipline for you. So with just a little bit of an assessment, we can decide which side of the fence is appropriate, live combat theater or live combat sport. And let's begin with a fundamental of pro wrestling and what we make. Are you comfortable with the fact that every single professional wrestling match has a loser, and at the very least, 50% of the time, that role will be assigned to you. At the very least, 50% of the time. You must be comfortable. You have to accept this in professional wrestling. In legitimate combat sport, that is not how it goes. But in the world of professional wrestling, on the side of the fence that could be called live combat theater, the finishes are not decided by skill. They are dictated by the story. Here's a second thing I want to roll into your lap, and it's about a mindset of professionalism that wrestlers will be required to have. Can you honor your bookings, and can you do what is asked of you, given that you may have no logistical control over the details and no creative control over the process? We have to understand this and still accept that we'll honor our bookings and we will do what is asked of us. And the last thing we need to assess is this. If you need to really strike, slam, or fight with other human beings, there are disciplines that promote exactly that, but pro wrestling isn't one of them. Maybe you need MMA instead. In mixed martial arts, you will not only be permitted, but encouraged to combat other human beings, to strike them, take them down, and make them submit as fast as you possibly can. And if you get really good at it, I understand there's even money involved. I suppose these things are simply not stated overtly enough, and that is why from time to time we end up with people in professional wrestling with mindsets and skill sets that would actually serve them better in different disciplines. To be a professional wrestler, you have to be comfortable with the fact that you will be asked to fill the role of loser in some matches. You'll be expected to honor your commitments and do exactly what is asked of you, and you may exert no creative control over it whatsoever. And while there definitely are ventures out there that will allow you to really fight with other human beings, and maybe to even find acclaim or make money doing so, that venture is not professional wrestling. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. I'm curious to know, in your travels as a professional wrestler, have you ever come across someone who seemed to not have one of these fundamental understandings about what pro wrestling is? And if so, would you be willing to leave that story for me down below in the comments? You don't have to name names if you don't want. I'm just curious to hear the story. And if you're looking for something further to watch, well, there's probably something right over there.